All right, Xwing community, it is time to sit down and once again talk about Fenn Rau. And in case you don't know, he was introduced in the Rebels cartoon show, Star Wars Rebels. I want to say it was episode 2. No, it was later than that. Protectors of Concord Dawn, which we're actually watching right now, and we'll see a little bit of him as a pilot. But there's a ton to talk about here. So he's a Fang Fighter pilot. He's Initiative 6, so he's one of the top most skilled pilots in the entire game of X-Wing. And you see that here in this video too, where he's introduced. But he's been in the game for a really, really long time. He's got no less than 5 individual card representations in the game of X-Wing, and he's a really cool lens to examine all of X-Wing through because he's in the Scum and Villainy faction primarily, and that faction is having runaway success right now in tournaments. He's also represented in past metas in both Scum and Rebels in 3 different ships. Well, the two Fang Fighters and the Sheathipede, where he shows up. So he's been represented as a big part of the meta many, many times. And he's just a really interesting lens to examine all of the meta through right now. With the X-Wing Alliance just switching to the 50-point scale and dialing back the importance of objectives, we're at a point where Initiative 6 aces are now dominating the meta in some very meaningful ways. And that's true of every single faction that's in the top of the ladder. You've got Darth Vader, of course, is showing up, but then also you've got Soontir Fel for Empire. You've got Sun Fac for Separatists. And then you've got Fenn Rau for Scum. And these 3 pilots pop up all the time. And Initiative 6 is such a big part of the game. I wanted to take a minute to talk about Fenn Rau in depth, in detail, and then also look at some lists, talk about some tournament results, and then talk about what makes Fenn Fenn and what that can teach us about the state of the game right now. So we're going to pause this. I know this is fun, but we're going to go to the next page here. So I'm just looking at all of the iterations of Fenn Rau in the game, just real quick. So the Sheathipede shuttle stands out in Rebels as being a relatively cheap ship you can take, only has 2 attack dice, so it's not terribly impressive, but it has Initiative 6 and a built-in white coordinate, which is immediately incredibly powerful. Then, of course, we've got Fenn Rau Rebel, who completely dominated the previous meta, I think pre-XWA, but also early XWA, just because the Rebel I6 Fang Fighter had such an intense support network in terms of what Rebels was able to do, and he was cheap. Like the chassis for an Initiative 6 Fang Fighter was very cheap. I believe he was 1 or 2 points cheaper than the Scum variant and performed really well. And that could have just spoken to how efficient Rebels was at the time, but it's hard to understate the power of an Initiative 6 Fang Fighter. And then, of course, we have kind of the mainstay, the Scum one that comes up a lot. This is Custom Fenn, again, Initiative 6, just like the other 2 variants. This is the Scum Fang Fighter, and he's the key ace of Scum. And his ability here, I'll read this one, I skipped the other ones. This one is while you defend or perform an attack, if the attack range is 1, you may roll 1 additional attack die. So up close and personal on offense gets an extra defense die. Up close and personal on offense, or defense, excuse me, he gets an extra defense die. Up close and personal on offense, he gets 2 additional attack dice, 1 for range 1, 1 for being Fenn. So this takes a 3-die attack up to a 5-die attack on a ship that's shooting first at Initiative 6, or tied for first if you lose on initiative. Now, just to talk about some of the fundamentals here, 4 hull, which is 1 more than your average TIE fighter, so he's, got a little bit of extra durability, but 0 shields. So it's a fairly sturdy ship, especially with the extra green die up close and personal, but it's an extra green die at the most dangerous possible place for this ship to be. Now, it's also got Concordia Face Off, where while you defend, if the attack range is 1 and you're in the attacker's forward arc, change 1 result to an evade result, which is really good. It's automatic evade, but it, at minimum, cancels out the extra attack die that your opponent is getting to shoot at you for being at range 1. So again, both of these abilities give him the best advantage for being at the most dangerous possible position. So he's a very high risk, very high reward pilot. And again, not having a shield is a big challenge. Now, taking a quick look at the action bar, got the focus, got the target lock, and then has both barrel roll and boost, but no link between them. You can roll focus, you can boost focus. Both of those are red focus. And when we look at the dial in a bit, we'll see how punishing that can actually be to take the red linked action for that focus. Now, this guy is Mandalorian, so he also gets the Mandalorian upgrades being Beskar plating, which has 2 charges. It's a modification, and he can either spend both charges to cancel a crit completely when he takes a crit in the forward arc, or you can spend 1 charge to change a crit to a hit. So you can change 2 crits to hits or discard one crit entirely, which is really, really good with the four hull, especially being able to throw out a crit completely. But again, it's one of those things where that's only applies if he's taking an attack in his forward arc. So once again, another ability that's very powerful, very defensive, but helps him in the most dangerous possible position. This is something I've always had trouble with this ship is it's a jouster. It's a jousting ace that benefits you from flying directly at someone's face. Um, and most of its defensive and offensive bonuses apply when it's in incredibly dangerous positions as a ship. Now, Fenn Rau being I6 has some edges where he's going to shoot early, he's going to move late, so you have chances to react to the board state, and he attacks early as well. So you can kind of choose whether to use your modifiers, your tokens for offense, or hold them for defense early on. So you have that decision with the maximum possible information as a player, which is really good. Then also has access to the other Mandalorian upgrades being clan training, which is a single charge that's recurring if I believe you destroy an enemy ship, if I remember correctly. We'll check that in a minute. But that's a talent where it lets you perform a red focus action when you engage. So this would let him lock and then red focus. So he could lock focus, which is really good if you're throwing 5 dice at initiative 6. Um, yeah, that's pretty great. And then I believe that's it for the Mandalorian upgrades. We'll look at the actual builds in a little bit. There's also one other variant we need to talk about, and this is the Xwing Alliance not too long ago rolled out a whole new set of the Armed and Dangerous pack of standard loadout cards for Scum as one of the options there. And this version of Fenn is also an option. So he's got the same pilot ability while you defend or perform an attack. If the attack range is 1, you may roll 1 additional die. Also has Concordia face-off, identical action bar. Has 3 attack, 3 evade. This one has an additional hull going from 4 to 5, which is notable. And then Fearless. So he comes stock with Fearless, which is another stock talent that's used with him often, which is while you perform a front arc primary attack, if the attack range is 1 and you are in the defender's primary arc, you may change one of your results to a hit result. So guaranteed mod, guaranteed hit. You roll 2 hits and 3 blanks, suddenly it's 3 hits. Very good. Um, again, you have to be in the most dangerous possible position, but it's good. And then this has 2 additional upgrades coming stock with Beskar reinforced plating, which just to check myself, while you defend if the attacker is in your forward arc before you would be dealt a face-up damage card, you may spend 1 charge, and it has 2, non-recurring, to be dealt that card face down, so turn a crit to a normal hit, or you may pay 2 charges, all of the charges, to discard it instead. And now this one also comes with adaptable power systems, which is after you fully execute a red maneuver or perform a red action. So if you barrel roll focus, boost focus, you may spend 1 charge. If you do, you may gain 1 deplete token to remove 1 stress token, which is really, really good to have that level of flexibility. This also says before you engage, you may spend 1 charge. If you do, you may gain 1 strain token to remove 1 deplete token. So what you could do with that is you could charge right in, you could boost focus, and then drop a charge on this to remove the stress. So you boost focus and you're not stressed anymore, but you are depleted. And then you can drop the second charge to remove the deplete. So for 1 turn, if you use both of these sides of this, you could do a red action and then take no penalty for it whatsoever. So the biggest advantage of this is probably coming stock with Fearless and Beskar, which I don't think you can take with the loadout together, but we'll look at that in a minute. But then also the extra hull. So you take Fenn Rau plus 1 hull with Fearless stock on it, plus this extra option that you can use but don't have to. The cool thing about adaptable power systems is you can just do a red action twice per game, which is also very, very good. I'm going to keep on going here. And just to look at these ships real quick. So this is Armed and Dangerous Fenn comes in at 15 points. And then that has the pieces we just talked about. So you pay 1 extra squad point for the extra hull and for Beskar and Fearless, and then also the adaptable power systems. Or you can shave 1 point off to go to custom. But like I said before, we did check on this. This does not have the option to take Fearless and Beskar. You don't have the loadout. His Beskar comes in at 6, I believe. Yeah. So Beskar is 6, Fearless is 3. He only has a total of 7. So you get 3 and 4. You can do Fearless and Optics and then still have 1 left, or you can do clan training. And he does have the double talent slot, so you have a lot of kind of flexibility there if you want to play around. So you can do clan training and Beskar. It's one of the more standard builds that you do see. And we're going to look at some tournament lists with Fenn as well. Now, this again, so you've got a 14 point, you've got a 15 point. I believe the Rebel one is 13, but he may also be 14. Yeah, so Rebel Fenn is 13. So the Scum one definitely comes at a premium. You're looking at a 14 or 15 point ship. It's roughly a third of your squad. Well, can't copy him because he's named, but say, yeah. Yeah, he's roughly a quarter of your squad. Plus a bit. If you take A and D, he's 15 out of 50. That you can still build around that, but he is taking out a big chunk of your list. Now, the thing for me, the biggest challenge with this is I said we'd look at this. We've got the action bar, we've got the stats on this, we've got the upgrade slots. Here are the upgrade slots for the custom one with 7 loadout. And this is the dial. And I wanted to take a look at this too, because again, this is a ship that has both boost and barrel roll, but has no option to do them both in the same turn. So it's an ace without a double reposition. Has the Talon rolls, the 2 Talons, but the only blue maneuvers are hard turns or banks. So it's got limited blues. The dial is open. It's not bad. It's got the 1 hards, it's got the 3 hards, so it's got both the fast turns and the slow turns. Doesn't have the 1 banks, but there's a lot you can do with this, but it is a pretty limited dial and action bar for an ace. So no option from upgrades or loadout to do double reposition. There's no option to really move this around a ton once you're stressed. So you do benefit a lot from that A and D version where you can do the unstressing of yourself, especially if you have to pull a K turn or a Talon roll. But it's a weirdly limited ship for an I6, especially if you compare this thing to Soontir or even one of the lower tier aces like a Whisper. Um, it actually has pretty limited mobility in terms of where it's able to be at any given time and ends up pretty predictable. So being able to do the drop stress helps a lot, but since you can only do that twice per game, assuming you use that charge on the A and D version, and that's the more expensive version, again, it's a fairly predictable ship. Having no shields puts it in a really vulnerable position, especially custom Fen with only 4 hull. It is possible to just get one shot with a proton torpedo and just be out of the game. And this is a pilot where you spend a lot of points bringing him into your list. You need him to do something. And I mentioned right now that this is a part of the game where Initiative 6 aces are really running away with the game. We are seeing swarms, we're seeing generic swarms. There's a lot of cool stuff out there, but your top performing lists and your top performing factions mostly do run some form of Initiative 6 ace, including Scum. And in some of the tournaments we're going to look at, we're going to see kind of the variance in how this guy performs just in different lists and based on where he shows up and where he ends up in the standings. But yeah, you know what? We'll get to that. So we've talked about the fundamentals. We talked about how all of his benefits really happen when you're in the most dangerous possible positions. Now, he can flank, and that offensive bonus still triggers if he's not being shot at. So that base pilot ability actually makes Fenn a better flanker than most of your Fang fighters because that ability triggers even if you're not getting shot back, which is really good. So he's got some defensive fallbacks if you are getting shot, especially if you're range 1, but then does have some advantages if he's flanking and hitting something from the side, which is easier to do at initiative 6. Let's pop around here. Uh, yeah, there we go. So I'm looking at some individual tournament results. We're looking at List Fortress. There are a ton of tournaments in the current 50 points um, meta, and it's a little bit established now. So I found a bunch of tournaments that had 20 plus players in the last couple months and was looking at some of these results. You're seeing again, let's see. So there's a swarm, and then we've got an I6 right here. We're seeing a lot of Sunfac, excuse me. You got Wedge as an I6. You got Cad Bane, and there's that Fenn Rau Armed and Dangerous appearing at 4th in this 1-day tournament. And this one was 20 players, I believe. Yeah. So this is 20 players. Let's see where else he appears. You got Fenn Rau Armed and Dangerous. We are seeing some lists where it doesn't appear at all, and those do actually tend to outperform the ones that do, but he shows up so much. Let's see. Yeah, okay, there's another one. And again, got another non-Fen appearing at the top. I will say, though, that the top scoring Scum list in this one did appear here at 4th. You got Fenn Rau in there. Yeah, let's looking at these. And then we'll look at the next one. This one, if you have not caught 312 Squadron's latest podcast, they had a really good one where they had the TO for the Torchlight G&H system open, and he was great. And this was a big event, happened in Canada not too long ago. This is a really cool one to see because you got 45 players for a off season. I don't know what to call this, but like that's cool. That's good turnout for one of these tournaments these days. And it's a better meta read than a lot of the ones we could find. And number one is a Scum list that did not bring Fenn. And I wanted to call that out because this is a really top-notch player, Reese here. I'd love to hear more about how he did with this list and what he did with it, but I did want to call it out that Scum is incredibly strong right now, and it's not necessarily strong because of Fenn. Now, this is based on all the things that I've talked about. I'm going to touch on this more, but Fenn having 4 hull and no shields, no double reposition, being a very high risk pilot who encourages very risky play, he's got a really, really low floor. Very high ceiling, he can be extraordinary and just like destroy entire lists and run the table, but a low floor where he can be one shot. He can be just hit and knocked out of the game very quickly, especially with smaller squad sizes, so you have less stuff to fall back on if he does go down. And with just, bad luck happening there. He does get a bit of a bump, and one of the reasons I6 aces are having this moment right now is that scoring now favors objectives less and dogfighting more. So it's really good for I6 aces that want to be dodgy and cagey and fight and get some kill points and fortress their points as well, rather than fight for board control and objectives. But looking at this, we've got Vader at that, and Vader and Soontir. We've got double I6 in the number 2 spot. We've got Armed and Dangerous Fenn here coming in at 8th. So this was a 2-day event, and that's another interesting thing about this because a lot of these events are 1-day events. So the smaller ones where you have like 20 people, you don't get a full idea of the meta because there's your day 1 results, and that's it. Whereas with these, you see like he was first both days. Reese did an amazing job. Evan did an amazing job 2 and 2. But in these, when they're bigger and larger events, you do see a flip where somebody will get third day 1, but finish in 8th, or 4 and 4, or get 5th day 1, and then end up in tied for 8th at the end of the total event. So it's important to watch that and important to look for events that do go to 2-day, that do go through a cut, where you do see that final result based on how things fall out the second day. Let's actually filter this. Yeah, there we go. So your top 2, it was Imperial Aces versus Scum, and this is really interesting that that list doesn't have a single I6, but it was able to take these guys down. And sneaky meta touch here, this guy did run Tirani Kulda with Painbot, so you get the rerolls, and Snapshot. So Tirani is the ship where if an opposing ship flies through your bullseye, or when you perform an attack, rather, excuse me, if the defending ship is in your bullseye, it has to either remove a green token or take a damage before attack dice are rolled, before any hits are actually rolled. Like if you perform the attack, they have to take a free damage. And with Snapshot, you can line it up so that these I6 aces are taking free damage before they've even fully activated. So they move, take a damage, and then they actually get to choose their action to get a token. So the snapshot timing is really good because it really punishes those aces. If they fly across that bullseye, they can take free damage before they even have the chance to counteract it, which is really strong. Um, this is just a weird list. I still can't believe about Lando. So we're going to be hearing more about that. But I imagine that this is one that would be really cool to see played because the play on this must be crazy. It's, I think Tirani's I4. I think Lando's also I4. And I know Dirge and Guri are I5. But interesting. But anyway, we look at this too, and we don't see Fenn appear until 8th. So that's something I want to call out. This is a cool list. I like this one a lot. But we do see Fenn again. He appears a lot. Like his play rate is insanely high. And this one doesn't have Fenn either. It's weird. It's some strange meta going on at this event, which is pretty cool. And then I got him again, Boba Fenn plus Mando. Yikes. At 22nd, day 1. So let's keep popping through these. I have quite a few to cover, and I don't want this video to get out of hand. But then we've got second place. This event is a Fenn Rau A&D. So he did perform well and lost to resistance here. And looking at this, we don't have the same kind of counterplay. We don't have the I6 aces. I believe this was in France, if I'm not mistaken. That doesn't read like France, but I think I had a France tournament pulled up. Hopefully I didn't get that wrong. And then we've got Fenn, Armed and Dangerous, coming in at, this is cut, so this is 8th. So tied for 8th. Oh no, here we go. Yeah, so Fenn came in second. This is a nasty, nasty list. 2 I5s in Mando and Nim, and then the filler objective piece in the A&D Fenn. Let's see here. Then we got Fenn. That's custom Fenn. Optics Fearless Training. Nice. Very flexible. Mando, Armed and Dangerous Mando. Interesting. There's some crazy stuff being. I've loved to see the variety of experimentation going on. This is a cool one. That's a 6-ship list with A&D Fenn. So expensive Fenn plus 5. Wow. Expensive Fenn plus Guri plus 5. That's a creative list. I like that, Nerf. Then we got Fenn again. And this is something I wanted to highlight, that Fenn has that high ceiling again, but he's everywhere. He's one of by far, whoa, crazy meta. I gotta talk about these scum lists another time. But Fenn is one of the go-to pieces in Scum. He's one of the most commonly flown pilots in the entire game, period. Especially when Scum is flown a lot, he comes up a lot. And so it's actually somewhat challenging to get a read on how he actually performs in the meta because he's so common and the lists perform across the map. Could get last, could get first, could get second, could get right in the middle of the pack. He's all over the place. So it's actually more difficult to get a full kind of competitive analysis on a pilot who is played this much. Let's see what else we got here. PSO Lomza. Uh, and this was the cut rank. So I really like looking at these day two events. This is terrifying. Look at that. Top three, first order. Fourth place. Congrats on getting fourth place with Republic. Well done. I would love to hear more about that. Oh my. Okay. On this one, we don't see. This one is crazy. This was another 2 day event because we had a cut and then we had a top eight. Um, top eight, top six. Interesting. We did have a cut, so we did have a longer event that gave us a better sense of the overall meta and how things shook out over a longer event. So that's pretty cool to see. Some crazy stuff going on here. Interestingly, I did want to call this out. So Scum doesn't appear until seventh place, and there is no Fen. So that again is one of the tricky things about this, where you see a non-Fen Scumless get first place, and then you see Fenless kind of perform in the middle, in the upper middle, and then the event that doesn't have any Fen, Scum does not place in the top 10. Yeah. So Scum doesn't place, well, excuse me, in the top five, I suppose. I was all stuff looking at this. Anyway, let's keep talking about that. So I looked at Metawing just to get a quick sense of like where things are, and you see Fenn Rau Pilot, and I don't know if this reads Armed and Dangerous Fenn or just Custom Fenn, but you see a ton of appearances, and you've got a 38th or just under 40 percentile win rate, which is not great. That means of the times that he wins, or of the times that he appears, his win rate is less than 50%. So his win percentile, his weighted percentile, is on the lower end behind ships that I would never have expected to be this high. And MetaWing is always a little bit funny where it doesn't track every single tournament result. Some things end up in weird places, but you see that Sun Fac is performing per frequency of appearance. They're really close. They're really, really close. But this is always interesting to read this. And let's look a little bit more just at Fenn. So there's Fenn Rau. Appears in 30 lists, 22 tournaments, average percentile, average win rate of 38.5%. And this is just some notable squadrons here. We see Fenn with Fearless and Clan Training. That's only four, so I assume there's also, I assume that also had optics because that's only four of the seven loadout. That's got Kanan and Hawk, weird. Um, and we also see Fenn again with Fearless Clan Training. Okay. And this looking at some of the common upgrades, Fearless is the highest win rate by far. It's just a really, really powerful talent on him just because those guaranteed hits really help. And this is something where we looked at the action bar and you're looking at a ship that has barrel roll focus, boost focus. So if you're using a repositions to get the most out of being I6, you lose out on those target locks. So he doesn't have easy access to target locks unless you build a list that gives those to him or give him optics, which isn't, comes up here as your fifth most powerful upgrade. Um, with a dramatic drop. So optics does kind of hold him back in terms of win rate there. So your best with Fearless Clan Training, those seem to be the best too. And then Marksmanship, I haven't seen on him in a long time, but that's always an option because that's another cheaper talent. But this is one of those things where he's always very, very vulnerable to dice. And that's where this overall win rate is not terribly surprising based on how often he appears. But if you're throwing 5 dice, that's great. Maybe you have Fearless and get the guaranteed hit. Maybe you don't. It's very unlikely you have a lock focus for the double modded attack. And that really holds Fenn down in terms of the ceiling, like the most he's able to appear. Like, yes, in some games you'll just roll hot and you'll just murder ships every single turn. Other times you're going to roll 2 hits out of 5 dice, like all the time, and they'll get evaded. Maybe you do 1 damage. And that's far more common in the games where I've run Fenn. So I've tried to build him so he gets that lock focus, which takes away from his defense, or you build the list around it so you're putting more points into Fenn And if Fenn goes down, then you are out of luck. Unless the combo support pieces you have that give the locks and give the focuses will work with the other ships as well. So he's always been a tricky piece for me to build around because he's not a self-contained piece. He can be, but then his mods are so unreliable that also you spend a lot of points in this ship that then can just go up in a puff of smoke. And this is, I promised at the outset that I was going to talk about Fenn in kind of like a general sort of meta sense, right? So he's an initiative 6 ace. He throws a lot of dice, good offense and good defense. And if you're playing against Fenn, you have to be aware of that ceiling. You have to understand what he can do, not necessarily what he will do. And you can either sink a bunch of fire into him, which may or may not kill him. It might, good. It may not, and then everything else is going to mess you up, and then you failed to kill Fenn. Or you could clip him with some damage and he could run away for the rest of the game. Or you could successfully take him out and then you win the game. But was it better to take him out or was it better to take out some other ships in the squad? I would argue it's usually good to throw enough fire at him to turn off Beskar. If he has Beskar, you want to hit him so you make him a little bit nervous. So he has to play cagey, he has to play careful, and the game could be over before he actually gets the full benefit out of what he is. If you make Fenn nervous, he's less of a threat, but you still need to keep an eye on him so he doesn't like clip in and get one of those nasty range one haymakers on you and actually roll hot. So ways to beat him, of course, he doesn't like tractor. He doesn't like jam. He does not like jam. If you take off those mods, it's a problem. Does not like getting hit out of his front arc. A lot of his abilities turn off if you hit him away from range one and or out of arc. So you hit him from a side, hit him from the back. A lot of his defensive abilities, including Beskar, turn off. So if you flank him or block him and then hit him from the side, he's much easier to deal with, which is pretty. But it's tricky. He's an I6 ace, and dial limitations aside, he does have both barrel roll and boost available to him, can be supported by other ships, and frequently is. The dial is pretty open as long as your opposing player is careful with it, so they can keep him out of danger or they can use him as bait, so make you chase him and then run away with him. So he is definitely a problematic piece to deal with, but he's much more manageable maybe than like a Suntirfell. A Suntirfell who can boost barrel roll and just like be wherever he wants to be, or a Sunfac who can boost barrel roll with those tractors and really kind of mess things up and have that turret to shoot from the side. Like he's not a tricky ship. He's not a slippery ship. It's not actually that hard to predict where Fenn's going to go compared to some of the aces out there. So you also see a lot of difference when you're playing with or against Fenn. Player skill matters a lot. If a player has played it with Fenn a lot, they're going to be very creative about where he goes and more effective about when and how to use him. If you have played against Fenn a lot, you'll be able to predict his moves and block him and more effectively deal with him. And that leads us to kind of our meta lens point, where if we're talking about Fenn Rau, we're talking about where he fits into the meta in the game. We're talking about initiative 6 aces. One thing we've seen in a lot of these, let's see if I can get to this. Ooh, oops. I jumped around too much. We'll get to that. One of these things that, let's see. Yeah. One of these kind of meta conversations we're having is I talked a lot about how Initiative 6 aces and smaller lists, like 4 ship lists, are dominating the meta right now. In most tournaments, in most events we see, these lists do really, really well. Where 4 to 5 ship lists do really well, particularly your 4 ship lists that have a lot of high initiative pilots that are able to chew through your swarms, that are able to outmaneuver your other aces, that are able to do enough damage to punch through and win games before objectives matter. Um, but one of the kind of golden ages of Xwing, going back to several metas, first edition and second edition, was the blocker meta, where you had a mix of aces, jousters, and blockers to counteract and deal with other things. You had some jousters to trim down or beat up on your lower initiative swarms and or your big beefy ships. You had the aces to really dance around and get to your end game and really finish out the game. And then you had cheaper chaff ships. Historically, these were used for blockers. Now they're more objective runners, which is the whole thing. But historically, they were used to predict where your high initiative aces were going to go, use low initiative to move first, and gum up the works and get in the way of these aces. And we may see a meta, and I'm assuming this is going to be a big deal at Worlds. We've probably seen it in stream games. We may see a meta where blockers come in and again start to become a core part of the tactics in the game, which is cool. I really like to see that. Um, we have seen that take a backseat because of objective meta. And since objectives are still a part of the game, blocking is a little bit less of an effective strategy than it perhaps was. But at the same time, if you're dealing with an ace, like if you block Soontir Fel and shut down his actions, that is a dead Soontir Fel more often than not. If you follow up on that, that chip is a lot easier to deal with. Likewise for Fenn. You block him and then you're able to hit him on the sides, turn off his defensive abilities, and really, really mess him up. Especially with Scum, if you have something like Gargor, who, if Fenn decides to shoot at the blocker, he takes a free crit for shooting at it. So don't do that. But one thing that these I6 aces really, really, really hate is being tractored. And I did want to make sure to do a shout out to Unkar Plut, your initiative 2 tugboat, which the tugboats are actually a little bit expensive right now in Xwing XWA points, which totally makes sense because of what they're capable of doing. These things can move backwards. But most important of all, if you have an initiative 2 blocker, you can pretty much guarantee it's going to move before almost every other ship in the game, especially if those lists are running thin lists that have a lot of high initiative aces. And then you got that Space Tug Tractor array. Choose a ship in your forward arc at range 1. That ship gains 1 tractor token or 2 tractor tokens if it's in your bullseye at range 1. It's easy to hit a medium base with that and actually single hit tractor a medium base. But if you land Fenn Rau, like you know where he is when this thing moves. So you can call like, am I going to move for him and hit him with this tractor? And then you can tractor him and potentially move him before his turn even happens. So like this is one of the scariest blockers in the game that can completely shut down some of the nastier aces out there, really mess stuff up. And if you have one of these and a coordinator in your squad at a different initiative, you get multiple chances to do this, right? So this ship moves, gets in a position to do the tractor ability, your coordinator moves, and then can choose to coordinate that tractor array ability on this ship. So if you have a couple of these, you have different initiative levels. There are some really nasty utility blockers that can really mess ships up. Another example is Chopper Gauntlet, who's a very expensive blocker, but I believe he's the one that can jam anything nearby him. Or a carrier of Chopper Astromech, if I'm not mistaken, as well, can also jam ships nearby him as well. So your ships that can really get in there and gum up the works will really mess up these I6 aces. And from kind of a meta lens, I'm very curious to see if these come up as a key strategy moving forward into the later parts of this meta as we approach Worlds. So let's see what else I got here. Look at that. We looked at that. And we looked at that. Looked at that. I don't have the crew card pulled up, but we don't really need to talk about that. So coming back to Fenn Rau, the thing about it is we talked about the strengths, we talked about the weaknesses, we talked about the ship, we've talked about Initiative 6, even touched on some counters. He's a ship you're going to have to know. And he's one of those pilots where the more you practice against him, the better prepared you're going to be to face some of the others. Of course, there's Vader, um, Anakin, Sunfac, Fenn Rau, Defender Vader. There's a lot of maybe Wedge, but like the X-wing ones are a different beast, right? So your Initiative 6 AC ships, your punchy power pieces are really common, and you need to make sure you're flying against some of the Initiative 6s out there. And there is basically no organized event you're going to go to where you don't face at least a couple Fenn Rau lists. You might even see a Rebel Fenn Rau, although he seems to have completely vanished from the meta. But it's a ship you kind of have to be aware of and figure out how to beat or figure out how to play if you're going to run him. And it's a ship that I have this long running conflict with because I like the character. I really love Fang Fighters as a concept, but I find them tremendously challenging to fly for kind of all the reasons I've talked about. They have this incredibly high ceiling, but struggle with mods. They have boost and barrel roll, but can't do them in the same turn. They have an okay action bar on a relatively open dial, but not in a way that let you really get the most out of it unless you can take, say, afterburners or a coordinator with them to do a bunch of extra stuff. So you end up with these ships that fly like medium bases, honestly, because of the dial options and action bar options they have. Their linked actions are very limited, and especially because you have to do the reposition before the focus. So if you do the reposition and it fails, you don't get the option to focus. Um, so then not only do you not reposition, but then you also don't focus. And so in those cases, though, that's one of the cases where clan training is so good on Fenn because you do your barrel roll and it fails, so you don't get the focus, but then you can still fall back into clan training to get that focus as that ability, and that's let's pull that up. Clan training. Before you engage, if you're not focused and there's an enemy ship in your forward arc at range 1, you may spend 1 charge to perform a red focus action and has 1 non-recurring charge. But after you perform an attack, if the defender is destroyed, recover 1. So it's this rechargeable red focus backup that's very, very powerful on Initiative 6 because you get the chance to have a redo, really. So if you do, and it says you can, it says if you're not focused. So it's also very good on a low initiative Fang fighter because you can have a focus, use it for defense, and then still use clan training in your engagement step to get an extra mod. It is nice. It's hard to say if it's better on an initiative 6 or better on a low initiative for that exact reason. It really depends on where you end up and what actions you end up taking. But so this is the thing. The Fang fighter is a weird ship. That's not going to be all and end all of the conversation. But Fenn Rau in particular is a pilot that comes up so much in so many discussions, in so many metas. He's been a staple of the entire X-Wing miniatures game for so long. You can't have any conversation about the meta, about Scum, about I6 Aces without talking about Fenn. And he's one that hasn't really come out of the meta either. He's always been a part of it, whether Scum is winning or losing. Fenn Rau has always been a staple piece of the faction, one of the most consistent pieces in the entire game. One of the reasons I wanted to sit down and talk specifically about him. And I think that he's going to continue to show up, but I think that the winning lists, if you want to win Worlds, we'll put it that way. If you want to win Worlds, you have to be able to beat Fenn. Maybe that's bringing Fenn and beating other Fenns with him. Maybe that's not bringing Fenn and ignoring him completely. Maybe that's bringing hard counters to Fenn that also can flex to be counters to other Initiative 6s. The thing is, this is a pilot you have to know. You have to know, you've got to understand him, you've got to fly with and or against him to fully prepare for Worlds. And I think I've done walked in or talked in circles enough here, so I'll go ahead and sign off here. But I really wanted to kind of dive into Fenn Rau, what the ship is, what the pilot is, what it can do, where it fits in, and talk a little bit about where the game is right now through the lens of Fenn Rau. And I'm very curious to hear if anyone's running Rebel Fenn. I was always surprised where, with the limitations of Scum Fenn, this ability still makes the I6 so incredibly powerful and is so good for the chassis. The while you defend or perform an attack, if the attack range is 1, you may roll 1 additional die, is super good. And that Rebel Fenn doesn't have that has always been surprising. I'm curious to hear, though, if anyone is actually running Rebel Fenn, because the chassis is still good. You have the loadout. He's 1 point cheaper than Custom Scum Fenn, which makes him 2 points cheaper than Armed and Dangerous Fenn. Same action bar, same everything. But his ability is much more support-based. Before a friendly ship at range 1 to 2 engages, if there's an enemy ship in its forward arc at range 1, that friendly ship may remove 1 non-lock red token. Like that stress control that Fenn offers to a Rebel squad is really, really good. And that's a lot more similar to the Fenn Rau crew card. But where I think he really benefited in the Rebel squads is he was cheap, and most other Rebel ships were cheap at the same time. So right now, Rebels as a faction are having a bit of an identity crisis, trying to find a new meta where they can be competitive. And I have not seen Fenn Rau attempted in that at all. I don't think I've seen even a single instance of Rebel Fenn run in the X-Wing Alliance's 50 points. I'd love to hear if anyone is. But what's really interesting to me about that is that really in the previous meta, this pilot was noticeably cheaper than the Scum version. And the backup pieces in Rebels were really strong, and Rebels was just really efficient. But it's really showing that the pilot ability of Scum Fenn is what makes this ship really stand out as a Scum pilot at that initiative, or as a Fang pilot at that initiative 6. This ability to just throw extra dice on top of the other benefits and advantages that a Fang fighter has been the mainstay point that makes this guy stand out as still the most dominant Fang fighter in the game. And I'm still grappling with that because it's so there's no limit to it. So if Fenn defends 6 times in a turn, he gets an extra die every single time, which is really good. If he somehow manages to shoot twice, like say you slap snapshot on there, um, now I don't think that applies to snapshot because adding or removing a die is a mod, so you can't snapshot on there. But still, he could snapshot and still get his normal attack and then shoot. But And the reason I say it counts as a mod is that if I'm not mistaken, Snapshot says that you cannot further modify the attack. Can't even take Snapshot. Let's actually, yeah, he can take it. He can take it. He can take Clan and Snapshot. That's crazy. It's not good, but he can do it. Let's see. Uh, or Snapshot. Oh, Snapshot. No, yeah, okay. Snapshot is 7, so I'd need to do just that. Yeah. After an enemy ship executes maneuver, you may perform attack against it as a bonus. Oh, wow, wait a minute. So Fenn can do a 3-die snapshot. So he could do a 3-die snapshot, then do his primary, but that's his entire loadout, which doesn't seem very good, but it's there. Um, huh. No, there it is. I'm sorry. Your dice cannot be modified, of course. Yeah. Okay. So no, he can't do that. My bad. I was right the first time. And it's probably pretty apparent here, especially if you've followed me for any length of time. I've grappled with Fenn for a long time. Just watching me do this video, I'm sure you can see how much I'm grappling with Fenn as a concept in Xwing. And that also is a really interesting point to touch on in terms of game design. Because when Fenn Rau was released, he was an absolute menace. Roughshod ran over the table, but that was back when you could take upgrades like push the limit. So you guaranteed him 2 actions. So he had the linked action where whatever combination of actions you wanted to do, you could do one white action, then do another one for a stress. So you could lock focus. You could focus lock. You could do all. You could switch whichever action you pair you chose, and that made him so scary. He was one of the beneficiaries of things like push the limit. Push the limit was super good. Um, and really, that was a piece that gave him double reposition. So the Fang Fighter had double reposition on launch, and then fell behind a bit, and then had the Mandalorian upgrades added. Has still been such a strong piece in second edition, but mostly a strong piece in second edition because other stuff was shaved down the same way. But he's never been the true ace piece in second edition that he was in first edition, which has been a weird thing to grapple with. And then even now, even with the Armed and Dangerous version, he's never gone fully back to what he was in first edition. And I don't know that he's gotten a toolbox to make him different either, where he's just a lesser version of what he was, despite the ceiling. The floor is still much lower. And it's really tricky though, because right now he's priced fairly well. Obviously, he's competitive, but his win rate is relatively low. He comes up a lot because he's affordable. But I don't envy anyone balancing this thing because the Fang Fighter represents a really incredible challenge in terms of game balance because it is very bad in some ways and very good in some ways. The lack of maneuverability, benefits only applying when it's in dangerous places, most all of those benefits being die rolls or only working in that forward arc instead of the side arcs. It obviously is tremendously powerful, but not powerful enough necessarily to be as expensive as it is, because it's not reliable, but not unreliable enough to be cheaper. So it still represents one of those really, really tricky pieces, again, in the entire history of Xwing, where that transition from first edition to second edition fundamentally changed what the ship was and what it could do because of the loss of that one talent. But then also the complete change of the game shifted where its position was in the game too. And then now you have it in a position where it can't be cheaper because of what it can do, but can't be more expensive because it doesn't always deliver, which is true of every ship. But the vulnerability to dice, the sheer number of different weaknesses it has, combined with the sheer number of strengths it has, makes it just such a strange mental puzzle to figure out the Fang Fighter and particularly Fenn Rau. Yeah, native 3 attack dice, native 3 evade dice, 4 hulls, so again, tougher than a TIE fighter, plus the automatic mods from Concordia Face Off and Fenn Rau's ability, of course. But Concordia Face Off, that free defense is really good, plus the access to the Mandalorian upgrades. Really so strong, and yet such a gamble. And that I think is where I have to leave it, because I keep talking myself in circles. But at the end of the day, I needed to make sure to talk about Fenn Rau, where he is in the meta, how he defines that Initiative 6 meta right now, how important it is to understand Fenn, some of the ways you can counter Fenn, and where that may result in a blocker meta, not just for Fenn, although Fenn is going to be incredibly vulnerable to a blocker meta. If we end up in a meta where blockers become an effective piece of this, because of the lack of maneuverability in Fenn compared to other I6 aces, he's going to be much less reliable because of that. So swarm play, aggressive blocker play, strategic tractor play is going to hurt Fenn more than it hurts most other ships out there. Kind of, except even then. So of course, being able to consistently place ships to block him will hurt Fenn more than other I6 aces because he doesn't have the way to get out of that, doesn't have the maneuverability to then come back around in ways that some of the others do. But at the same time, he has the built-in bulk between Beskar plating, between his Concordia face-off, between his extra dice. If he's caught out in a position where he's blocked in front of a bunch of stuff that's blocking him, he's better able to weather those head-to-head jousting hits than the other I6 aces. So I think he will suffer from a blocker-heavy meta, and especially a strategic blocker meta, but then he may also pull out some crazy wins that he absolutely shouldn't and no other pilot would. So there we are. We'll have to leave it there. I'm going to talk more broadly about meta and worlds prep moving forward. I wanted to make sure to sit down and have this kind of thought piece on Fenn Rau. Hopefully, this hasn't been a waste of time. I would love to hear your thoughts about this, what you're doing with Fenn, how he's performing, what you're thinking about him, especially if you're talking about a rebel Fenn. That's something I haven't seen and wonder where it went. Let's talk. Tell me more about it. That's it. Till next time. Cheers.